Tonight, you're about to hear 10 chilling real-life horror stories that will make you question everything around you. Your home, your friends, even the sky above. From haunted cabins deep in the Alaskan wilderness, to mysterious strangers in fast food drive-thrus, to forest rangers who swear you never checked out. Each story is told in raw, first-person detail, just like it really happened. These aren't just stories, they're confessions. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare to dive into a world of unexplained disappearances, eerie messages, and watchers in the dark. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a night of horror. And trust me, you'll want someone to talk to after this one ends. Welcome to your worst sleepless night. I don't care if no one believes me. I've gone over it 100 times, and the story always ends the same way. With that ranger's pale face, his shaky hands holding the clipboard, and those words I can't get out of my head. You checked in on July 10th, but you never checked out. It started as a solo camping trip to clear my head. I'd just gone through a rough breakup and figured a week alone in the Alaskan backcountry would do me some good. Nature, silence, no signal, just me and the trees. The check-in station was a small wooden booth near the trailhead, with a binder logbook and a bored-looking forest ranger in his mid-50s. He asked for my name, phone number, and how long I planned to stay. I told him 3 nights. I remember, his pen dragging across the paper, the way he slowly wrote, "Expected checkout, July 13th. That first day hiking in, everything felt fine. The trail was quiet, the air sharp and cold even though it was July. I could hear the crunch of my boots on gravel and the distant creaking of trees. It took me about 4 hours to reach the clearing I'd picked from a map, tucked near a stream, deep enough that I wouldn't hear any other hikers if there even were any. I set up camp, boiled some coffee, and watched the sun dip below the tree line. That night, I heard something strange. It wasn't an animal. I grew up near woods, and I know what deer or bears sound like. This was something else. It sounded like whispering, barely audible but rhythmic, like someone repeating the same thing over and over again. At first, I thought it was the water from the stream, the wind, or my imagination. But when I stepped out of the tent to pee, I realized it was coming from behind the trees, just beyond the firelight, too steady to be wind, too human to be an animal. I shined my flashlight toward the sound and it stopped instantly. Nothing moved. I didn't see anyone. But the next morning, I found footprints. Not boot prints, bare feet, small, narrow, and deep, pressed into the mud along the edge of the clearing, just watching my camp. I left that day. I packed up faster than I ever had before. I didn't even eat breakfast. I just broke camp, tightened my pack, and took off. I told myself I'd cut my trip short and head back to the ranger station. I felt stupid for being scared, probably just some hiker messing with me. But the whispering had gotten under my skin. The hike back took longer, a lot longer. I must have taken a wrong turn, or the trails had shifted. Trees I swore I'd passed before now looked unfamiliar. The air smelled stale and metallic, and I didn't hear any birds. Just silence. Oppressive, thick silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Around sunset, I realized I was still deep in the woods. My GPS had long since died, and I hadn't seen any trail markers in hours. But then I saw it, a flicker of movement between the trees. A man, dressed in a ranger uniform. He was facing away, head slightly tilted like he was listening for something. I shouted, ran after him, but by the time I reached the spot he'd been standing, he was gone. That night, I camped again. No choice. And the whispering returned. Louder this time. Closer, circling my tent like a chant, in a language I didn't recognize. I didn't sleep. Just sat up with my knife, flashlight in hand, eyes fixed on the shadows that kept bending in ways they shouldn't. When morning came, I ran. No trail, no direction. Just ran toward what I hoped was the edge of the forest. And somehow, by late afternoon, I stumbled out onto gravel. A road. Civilization. I hitchhiked with a local who looked at me like I was insane but didn't ask questions. Back at the ranger station, everything looked different. It was the same. Booth, same building. But the paint was more faded, the roof had more moss, and the air felt heavier. I approached the desk, and the man inside was not the one I'd spoken to days earlier. He looked younger, different uniform, and startled to see me. He asked if I needed help. I told him I was just checking out, gave him my name. That's when he pulled the logbook. "You checked in on July 10th, he said, frowning, "but you never checked out." He turned the book toward me. The ink was smeared, faded, like it had aged a decade. My name was there, in shaky writing, but the date was wrong. Expected checkout, July 13th, 2013. I stared at him, told him it had only been 3 days, but he didn't believe me. Said no one had seen me in over 10 years, that I'd vanished off the grid, that my family had filed a missing persons report, that my emergency contact was dead. I left that station without saying another word. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what those whispers were, or why the woods shifted like they were alive. All I know is, something watched me in those trees. Something that didn't want me to leave. And sometimes, when it's quiet enough at night, I swear I still hear them whispering my name. I was alone in a rental cabin just outside Juneau when the weather alert came through. Not a warning for a storm. Not avalanche danger. Not even wildlife, it said, in plain black letters on a red background. Do not leave your room until sunrise. Severe phenomenon expected in your area. Do not acknowledge any knocking. I stared at the screen for a solid minute, thinking it had to be a glitch. I'd never seen an alert like that before. The wording was off, too vague, too human, and there was no agency signature at the bottom. No NOAA, no locale warning system ID, nothing. Just my name. That's what made me freeze. Right beneath the message it said, User Jacob Weller. Location confirmed. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I'd booked the cabin last minute through a rental site with a burner email. I didn't want to be found. Not after what happened with my brother. I just wanted a week to be alone, to think, to figure things out. The cabin itself was old but well kept. One large room, a fireplace, small bathroom, and a view of the snow-covered tree line that stretched endlessly into the Alaskan wilderness. No neighbors. No town lights. No cell service. And now this. I double-checked the weather alert app. It was real. Pushed to my phone. But when I tried to refresh the page, it vanished. Just disappeared. The timestamp said 5:47 p.m. Sunset was in 30 minutes. I went to the window and looked out. Everything was still. No snow falling, no wind, no sound. The kind of silence that makes you feel like the whole world is holding its breath. I turned to grab my coat anyway. I wasn't going to sit there all night just because some glitchy app decided to spook me. But then I heard it. A knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on the front door. I froze. I hadn't heard any footsteps. No approach. Just knock. Knock, knock. The kind of knock you feel in your chest more than your ears. I didn't move. My hand was still halfway to my coat when the second knock came. Louder, heavier. This time, followed by the soft creak of the wooden porch boards bending under weight. I stepped backward, slowly. The fireplace behind me crackled weakly, casting long shadows across the log walls. A voice followed, a low, familiar one. "Jake, open up. It's me." I felt my stomach flip. It was my brother's voice. But that was impossible. Luke had been dead for 8 months. I'd found him myself, remember? I'd driven up to his cabin after weeks of unanswered texts and found the door unlocked, the fire cold, and his body slumped in the corner with eyes wide open. There was no blood, no injury, just that look on his face, like something had terrified him in his final second. Now I was hearing his voice through my door. "It's freezing out here, man," he said, knocking again, softer this time. "Let me in." I didn't speak, didn't breathe. I just backed away toward the small kitchen and grabbed the only thing that resembled a weapon, A fire poker. I held it tight, my palms sweating, heart pounding. Then I remembered the alert. Do not acknowledge any knocking. A new sound replaced the knocking. Something like nails scraping along the siding. Slow, dragging. It circled the cabin, moving toward the window. I rushed to the far wall and blew out the lantern. Darkness took over the room except for the glow from the fire. I crouched low, waited. A face appeared in the window. Not pressed against it, in it, like it was part of the glass. Mouth open, eyes wide as if screaming. But no sound came through. It looked like Luke, but wrong. The skin was too pale, the mouth too long, and the eyes looked exactly like they had the night I found him. Glossy, terrified, dead. I blinked and it was gone. Just black glass and my own faint reflection. I didn't sleep that night. I sat against the wall with the fire poker gripped in my hand and every candle blown out. Every so often I heard footsteps pacing the porch, sometimes just outside the walls. Once the sound of something breathing, low and wet, right on the other side of the thin cabin wall. But I never opened the door. At exactly 6:43 a.m., a new alert came through. All clear, resume activity, stay on marked paths. That's all it said. I waited another hour before opening the door. The porch was dusted with fresh snow. Untouched. No footprints. No drag marks. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the door to lock it one last time, I noticed something etched into the wood just above the handle. 5 deep grooves, like fingernails. And beneath them, scrawled in the same jagged pattern, "Next time, answer." I drove out of there without packing. I never looked back. And I've kept every weather app on my phone since then. Because if that alert ever comes again, I don't think I'll get a second warning. It started as one of those nights you dream about. The kind where everything feels still, untouched, and impossibly perfect. I was house-sitting for my uncle in a remote part of Alaska, somewhere outside of Wiseman, far from anything paved. His cabin sat alone at the edge of a frozen clearing, surrounded by pine trees that looked like blackened spears under the moonlight. The snow reflected the sky like glass, and on that night, the aurora borealis had rolled in thick and vivid. I'd seen the northern lights before, but never like this. They weren't just a wash of color. They moved in slow, snake-like patterns, pulsing as if alive. I stepped outside in my boots and jacket, crunching across the ice to get a better view. My breath clouded around me in thick plumes. The cold bit at my face, but I didn't care. They were mesmerizing. Greens, purples, and blues rippling above me in wide ribbons. For a second, I forgot I was alone. Then they shifted. That's the only way I can describe it. Shifted. I wasn't imagining it. Those bands of color curled together, tightened and formed shapes, lines, letters. It was my name. Justini blinked, frozen more from disbelief than the cold. The letters hung there, glowing in that eerie green, as if written by some giant hand in slow motion. My skin prickled underneath all my layers. I stood there, heart thudding, staring at my name in the sky. I even looked behind me, expecting someone to be messing with me. But there was no one. Just the cabin, the clearing, and the woods beyond. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but as soon as I lifted it, gone. The lights rippled apart like ink in water. Just ordinary aurora again. I stayed outside for another 10 minutes, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. Inside, I tried to laugh it off. Sleep deprivation? Optical illusion? I hadn't been sleeping well since arriving. Something about the silence up here was too deep, too complete. I kept thinking I heard footsteps on the porch at night, but every time I looked, nothing was there. Just snow, wind, and trees that never moved. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept glancing at the window, expecting the lights to return. Around 3:30 a.m., I gave in and went outside again. They were already there, this time pulsing in strange, slow flickers like a heartbeat in the sky. The same eerie green light, but no shapes. Until I blinked. Come. It appeared above the tree line. One word, floating, glowing, pulling at something deep inside me. Then, Justin again. Bigger this time. Closer. As if the lights had descended slightly, reaching for me. I didn't move. I couldn't. My brain screamed at me to go back inside, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like being hypnotized. I felt warmth rising in my chest like someone was pressing a hand against my skin. There was a low hum, subtle but steady, vibrating through the air, and then the lights began to move downward, not slowly either. They dropped, bending like a massive hand curling through the sky, descending toward the clearing. A rush of wind followed it, sharp and sudden. The trees swayed violently. Snow blasted against my face. That's when I ran. I scrambled back into the cabin, slammed the door, locked it, and turned off every light. My chest heaved. I peeked through the blinds. The lights were lower now, no longer in the sky. They hovered maybe 20 feet above the snow, drifting like mist, swirling and curling just outside the clearing. But they were coming closer. There was no heat from them, no sound now. Just that suffocating silence again. My name flickered once more in the haze, stretched out and twisting. Barely legible, but still there. I backed away from the window. That night, I slept in the bathtub with the door locked, wrapped in 2 sleeping bags. I didn't look outside again until daylight. The next morning, I found footprints, mine, leading halfway into the woods behind the cabin. That would have made sense if I had actually walked that way, but I hadn't. Not even close. And the weirdest part? The snow was freshly fallen. Soft, untouched powder. But those footprints went under it, as if they'd been made before the snow fell. I called my uncle to ask if anything weird ever happened there. He paused, then said, "You saw the lights, didn't you?" I asked what he meant. He sighed. "Just stay inside if they get low. Don't follow them. They sometimes mimic things. They've always done that. Not often, just sometimes." I pushed him, but he wouldn't say more. Just told me he'd be back early and to not go out again at night. I didn't. The rest of the week, I kept the blinds shut tight. I didn't watch the sky, but every night I still saw that green glow through the cracks, like it was waiting. On the last night, my phone screen lit up on its own. Just a notification. "Come outside, Justin." No sender. No app. Just text. I powered off the phone, but it powered itself back on. That's when I realized. The glow wasn't just outside, it was in the hallway. Moving, and it was spelling again. I knew something was off the second the door closed behind me. It wasn't the cold. I was used to that by now. I'd been in Alaska for 3 weeks, rotating through isolated government weather stations to record climate data and check instruments. The job was supposed to be simple. Stay in a prefab bunker for 72 hours, log sensor activity, send updates through the satellite radio, then move on. But this station, Station 23B, felt wrong. The interior lights were already on when I arrived. That was strange. The protocol is clear. Every station remains locked and dark until the next observer arrives. But the door wasn't locked, just closed. And the lights, fluorescent, buzzing faintly. Faint enough that I thought maybe I was imagining it. Inside smelled used. Not musty or stale like it should after sitting empty for weeks. The air had that sharp, dry scent of skin and breath, like someone had just left the room minutes before I stepped in. I called it in. Station 23B accessed at 1500 hours. Possible maintenance breach. No response. The radio had a faint hum, signal steady but no reply from base. I figured it was atmospheric interference, not uncommon that far north, and went about the checklist anyway. Checked the thermal sensors. Confirmed barometric calibration. Updated the power log. Everything was in order, except the food. There's a sealed emergency crate in every station. Rations for 7 days. You're not supposed to open it unless weather grounds you past your rotation. Mine had been opened. Some of the foil packs were gone. Others half-eaten and left stuffed back inside like someone had panicked and repacked them in a hurry. The worst part? The water jugs were half empty. Not spilled, used. Still, I told myself someone must have had a medical emergency. Maybe a ranger or pilot took shelter during a storm. It happens. I even tried to laugh it off. Just nerves, cold air, paranoia. But that night, I heard breathing. I just finished logging the wind speed when I heard it, not from the vents, not from outside, but from behind the storage hatch. A low, steady inhale. Then an exhale, slow, rhythmic, like someone trying to stay quiet. The hatch is locked from the outside. No reason anyone should be in there. I grabbed the flashlight and stood in front of it for a full 10 minutes, trying to convince myself it was the heater, maybe a pressure release valve. But I'd heard valves before. They don't sound like lungs. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, the breathing had stopped. Everything was quiet again, but the sense of wrongness hadn't left. The bunker felt tighter, smaller, like the walls were just a little closer than they had been yesterday. That's when I found the writing. It was scratched into the underside of the table. Letters gouged deep into the metal. Don't sleep. That was it. Just those 2 words. I checked the station's maintenance log again. Nothing. No notes, no alerts, no incident reports. The last person assigned here had signed out over a month ago. I tried the radio again. Still no response. That night, I wedged a chair against the hatch, slept with the emergency axe next to me. Or tried to. At exactly 2:43 a.m., I woke up to a click. The hatch had unlatched. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The chair scraped slowly as it shifted, like something was pressing against it from the inside. Then I heard a voice. It was my voice. Hey, it's okay. Let me out, not a recording, not an echo. My exact voice. Calm. Reassuring, like someone trying to coax a scared animal. Come on, Jacob, just open the hatch. You're not thinking straight. I backed away, holding the axe tight, shaking so bad I thought I might throw up. The voice kept talking, mimicking my tone, my words, even using things only I knew. My mom's nickname for me, the name of my dog when I was 8. Then silence. Total, suffocating silence. I waited until sunrise before approaching the hatch. It was still slightly cracked, the lock hanging loose. I forced it shut and sealed it with a screwdriver and duct tape from the supply bin. I stayed up for the next 36 hours. No food, no sleep, no response on the radio. The station's backup generator died the following night and the lights cut out. That's when I heard it moving, above me, in the crawl space, scraping back and forth like it was pacing. I didn't wait for my 72 hours to end. I left before dawn and hiked 10 miles to the Ranger airstrip with frozen fingers and black spots in my vision. No one believed me. They said I probably suffered hypothermia, sleep deprivation, cabin fever, but I know what I heard. And when they sent someone to inspect 23B, they found it empty. No signs of forced entry. No recordings on the log. Everything was sealed tight, except the hatch. Inside it was scratched something new. You did sleep. I haven't slept since. I didn't notice the mirror until the second night. The cabin was part of one of those remote digital detox getaways. No signal, no internet, no TV. Just mountains, pine trees, and a solar-powered heater that barely kept the chill out. It was exactly what I needed. After the divorce and everything that came with it, I just wanted to disappear for a while. Breathe. Reset. The first day was peaceful. I chopped wood, hiked a bit, made soup on the propane stove. The air felt clean. My brain was finally quiet. But on the second night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed something strange. The mirror in the bathroom, a tall vintage-style piece with a gold frame, had no reflection. At first, I thought the room was too dark. The overhead light flickered sometimes, and the bulb buzzed faintly when it warmed up. But I turned my flashlight on and pointed it directly at the glass. Still nothing. No reflection, not mine, not the sink behind me, not the walls, just pitch black. I stood there staring at it, confused but too tired to care. Figured maybe it was just coated glass. Maybe it wasn't a real mirror. I went to bed without thinking much of it. The next morning, everything was normal. I walked back into the bathroom and saw myself. Tired eyes, messy hair, flannel hoodie. The mirror worked. Clear as day. I chalked the whole thing up to exhaustion. Maybe I'd just imagined it. But then it happened again. That night, just after midnight, I walked into the bathroom to pee, and the mirror was black again. Not dark, empty, like the glass was looking into a space that didn't belong to the room, like a window into somewhere else. I waved my hand in front of it. Nothing. I turned the lights off and on. Nothing. I even knocked on it. It sounded solid, but it didn't reflect a thing. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing, trying to logic it out. And then, something moved. Inside the mirror. It wasn't me. It wasn't my shadow. It was something else. Tall, thin, pale. It passed through the black like a shape behind fogged glass. No features, just a blur of movement. I stumbled back and nearly knocked over the towel rack. When I looked again, the mirror was normal. My reflection stared back at me. Wide eyes, jaw clenched. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I checked everything. The frame. The wall behind it. I even lifted it off the hook to see if maybe it was some kind of two-way glass. Nothing. It was a normal mirror. Heavy, dusty. No wires. No cameras. Just old and maybe warped, but I couldn't shake what I saw. That night I stayed up, sat in the living room with a cup of coffee, watching the time. At exactly 12:01 a.m., I walked into the bathroom and turned on the light. No reflection. Just darkness again. Only this time, there was writing. On the inside of the mirror, like fogged-up glass, letters slowly fading in. You don't belong here. I backed out of the room, heart hammering. Shut the door, locked it. Then, almost immediately, I heard something knock from the inside. 3 slow knocks. I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. I just stood there staring at it for what felt like hours. When I finally fell asleep on the couch, I had the worst dream of my life. I was standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. But it wasn't mimicking me. It just stood there, smiling. I waved. It didn't. I turned. It didn't. I tried to walk away, and it reached for me. Long fingers pressed flat against the glass, tapping once, twice, then it cracked. The sound of glass breaking woke me up. It was morning. The cabin was silent, but the bathroom door was open. I stepped inside. The mirror was clean. No cracks, no writing. My reflection looked back like nothing had happened. But something had. I packed my things, left 3 days early. I didn't tell the rental company. I didn't leave a review. But sometimes, late at night, I'll catch my reflection doing something. Off, just for a second. Like blinking too slow, or turning its head half a beat too late. I haven't looked in a mirror after midnight since. And I never will. I booked the cabin for 4 nights. That's it. It was a solo getaway. Off-grid, quiet, up in the mountains of southern Alaska. I found it through a weird little website full of obscure listings, the kind of places that don't show up on Airbnb or Google Maps. The photos showed a cozy one-room log cabin with a wood stove, a small kitchen, and views of the surrounding pines. No cell signal. No internet. Perfect. The host, someone named EC, never gave a full name. Just emailed me check-in instructions and a code to the lockbox. No key handoff, no staff. Just go in, enjoy your stay, and lock up when you leave. I arrived just before sunset on September 1st. The woods were already cold, the air sharp and still. There were no other cabins in sight, no tire tracks, just mine. Inside, everything looked as advertised, rustic, clean, silent. The windows had heavy curtains. The wood floors creaked under every step. There was a single guestbook on the coffee table, beside a jar of pens and some dusty travel brochures. I didn't open it right away. I was tired from the drive and too busy unpacking. The first night went fine, though I woke up twice to what sounded like footsteps on the porch. I chalked it up to branches falling or animals passing by. The cabin was old. Everything creaked. The next morning, while drinking coffee, I finally flipped through the guestbook. At first, it looked normal. Entries from people dating back to 2015, talking about how peaceful the woods were, how beautiful the stars looked at night, how quiet it was up here. Then I saw a page dated just 2 days before my arrival, August 30th, Jacob Weller, another night. The noises are getting closer. I don't remember writing the last entry. That made my stomach twist. My name is Jacob Weller. I hadn't been here before. I'd never even heard of this place until last week. I flipped back a page. August 29th, Jacob Weller. I think something is watching me from the trees. It knows my name. More entries. Each one dated consecutively. Each one signed with my full name. All written in handwriting that looked eerily like mine. A little shakier, like whoever wrote them was trembling. I scanned back through the rest of the guest book. August 28th, Jacob Weller. I thought I only booked 4 nights. Why am I still here? And on and on. August 27, Jacob Weller. August 26, Jacob Weller. August 25, Jacob Weller every single day. My name. My handwriting. Backdated weeks before I ever arrived. I slammed the book shut and stared at the walls like they might give me an answer. The silence in that moment felt loud, like the cabin was holding its breath. I grabbed my bag and went to the door. I didn't care that I'd only stayed 1 night. I didn't care that I was in the middle of nowhere. I just wanted to leave. When I opened the door, I stopped. There were footprints in the snow. Bare feet, leading from the woods to the porch, then vanishing at the threshold, like something had walked up to the door and never left. I turned around and locked the door. Didn't leave. Couldn't. That night the wind howled. I pushed a chair against the front door and kept the fireplace burning. Around midnight I heard scratching at the back window. Not tapping, scratching. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails tracing the glass. I didn't go look. The next morning, I checked the guest book again. September 2nd, Jacob Weller. I tried to leave, but the road didn't take me anywhere. The trees moved. I hadn't written that, but I remembered having a nightmare that matched it perfectly. Driving through the woods, taking turns that led back to the same fork over and over again, like the forest was looping itself. I stayed in bed most of the day, half paralyzed with fear. I didn't touch the door, didn't open the curtains. When night fell, the cabin went unnaturally quiet, and then came the knocking. Soft at first. From the front, then the back, then from both sides at once. It didn't stop. For hours. By sunrise, it had gone silent again. I grabbed the guest book with shaking hands and flipped to the last page. September 3rd. Jacob Weller. I finally understand. You don't check out of the cabin. You get written in. Today is September 4th. There's already a new page waiting for me. Blank. The pen is sitting on the table. But my hand. It's already moving. Driving the Dalton Highway in the middle of an Alaskan winter is a bad idea. Everyone told me that, but I wasn't looking for advice. I was looking for silence. After my father died, I didn't want condolences or casseroles or church people knocking at my door. I wanted to disappear for a while, and the ice road felt like the farthest I could go without falling off the map. So I packed my truck with supplies, installed new chains on the tires, and started the drive north just as the sun dipped below the horizon for what would be nearly 24 hours of darkness. By the time I hit mile marker 212, I hadn't seen another vehicle in over 3 hours. The snow was coming down in fine, swirling crystals, the kind that looked like ash in the headlights. My breath fogged up the inside of the windshield no matter how high I blasted the defroster. Outside was nothing but endless white-black trees, and the faint outline of the pipeline slicing through the wilderness. Then I saw it, something on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was an elk. Tall, motionless, standing right at the edge of the ditch, but the proportions were wrong. Its limbs were too long, its torso too thin, and its head, it was tilted in an unnatural way, like it was listening. As I passed, I instinctively turned to look. It was gone. No tracks in the snow, no animal running off, just gone. I shook it off. Sleep deprivation, maybe. I hadn't stopped since Fairbanks, and the rhythmic hum of the tires on packed snow was starting to lull me. I told myself I'd find a pull-off soon and get some rest. That's when my phone buzzed. A single notification from the satellite weather system. Caution. Glare. Ice reported ahead. Mile 218 to mile 225. Reduce speed. Remain in vehicle. Do not exit. I tapped the screen. Under the warning, in smaller letters, was a line I'd never seen in a weather alert before. Do not acknowledge it, no matter what it says. I read it twice. Then a dull thud hit the side of my truck. I slammed the brakes, fishtailing slightly before coming to a sliding stop on the shoulder. My heart was pounding. I looked in the mirrors. Nothing, just the whirling snow behind me. I rolled down the window an inch and listened. Nothing but wind. But when I looked forward again, something was standing in the middle of the road. It had no clothes, no face, just a tall, pale shape, slightly hunched, arms dangling low like it had no bones. It didn't move, didn't react, just watched. I couldn't explain how I knew it was watching me. There were no eyes, no features, but I felt its gaze like a needle against the skin. I slammed the truck into reverse, trying not to take my eyes off the thing. My tires spun before catching, slowly pulling me back down the ice road. But the figure didn't follow. It just stood there. Then it spoke, but not out loud. The voice came from inside my cab. From the dashboard. From the vents. From my own head, Jacob. Open the door. I froze. My name. I hadn't told anyone where I was going. I didn't even log my route. Pull over, it said again. It's safer out here. The snow started falling harder. My windshield frosted at the edges despite the heat blasting. The figure didn't move, but I could feel it growing closer somehow, stretching its presence into the vehicle, into me. I remembered the alert. Do not acknowledge it. So I cranked the wheel and drove forward. Right at it. I don't know why. Maybe because some animal instinct told me that slowing down or flinching would be worse. Maybe because I knew it wanted me to stop. As my headlights reached it, the shape collapsed. Not like it fell, like it just folded in on itself, limbs bending the wrong way, vanishing into the snow in a blink. I kept driving, didn't stop again until I reached Coldfoot hours later, just as dawn started to tint the edge of the black sky a soft gray. I told no one. What could I say? But that night, in my motel room, I checked the weather alert history. There were no records of the message. No ice warnings logged, and my phone's GPS showed I never left Fairbanks, but I know where I went. I remember the cold. I remember the eyes, and sometimes when I drive late at night, even far from Alaska, I hear that same voice whispering from my vents. It's safer out here, Jacob. The emergency radio in our ranger cabin never made a sound unless something was seriously wrong. A fire, an avalanche, or someone lost in the woods. That's why I didn't understand why it crackled to life at 3:14 a.m. I was already awake. Couldn't sleep. The wind had picked up outside, the kind of bitter cold that made the logs in the walls groan. I was alone, filling in for the winter rotation at a remote Alaskan outpost near the Canadian border. Closest soul was 70 miles out. No roads. Just snow, trees, and static. Then the speaker popped. A low hum buzzed through, followed by a high-pitched hiss. I leaned in, thinking maybe a storm alert was coming through. Then I heard it. Jacob. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a voice I recognized. Not one of the other stations. Not protocol. Just my name. Whispered, drawn out like someone testing how it felt in their mouth. Jacob, can you hear me? I stared at the radio. No lights flashing, no codes, no signals, nothing that made sense. I picked up the receiver and tried hailing the main base. Dead air. I switched channels. Tried every known frequency. Same result, just that low buzz like the speaker was holding its breath. Then it spoke again. Don't go outside. I stood there frozen, heart pounding in my ears. The voice was distorted but calm. Soft, like it was just trying to help. and it knew my name. I didn't respond. Didn't touch the mic. The speaker popped again, louder this time. A burst of static hissed like something brushing up against the mic on the other end. I saw you in the window. I turned fast, flashlight beam slicing across the room. The windows were iced over, barely letting in any moonlight, but I could feel it. The sensation of eyes watching me. Like something was just behind the glass waiting for me to look. The wind howled louder. I crept toward the door, every step feeling like it echoed through a tunnel. My hand hovered near the latch, not touching it, just close enough to feel the cold seeping through. Then the voice returned. You left the gate open. I backed away. There was no gate. Not here. Not for 20 miles in any direction. Just woods and old trap lines nobody checked anymore. I pulled the battery out of the radio. It popped once, then went completely silent. Dead. Like nothing had ever come through it. I stayed up the rest of the night, flashlight in hand, fire stoked high. Nothing else happened. No knocks. No more voices. At sunrise, I walked the perimeter. No tracks. No sign of anyone. Not even wildlife. But when I came back inside, I noticed something I swear hadn't been there the night before. A fingerprint, smudged across the mic, like someone had pressed their lips against it from the outside. I called it in later that morning using the backup satellite line. Told them the radio was malfunctioning. That I'd heard something strange. They chalked it up to feedback. Said solar storms could cause interference. That voices sometimes bounce off the atmosphere and scramble through frequencies. But no one could explain why the voice said my name. I replaced the radio. Logged the incident as equipment error. But 2 nights later, at the same time, 3:14 a.m., the new unit came to life. This time, it didn't speak right away. It breathed. Long, shallow inhales, close to the mic, almost wet, like someone was injured. I unplugged it immediately. I don't use the emergency radio anymore unless I absolutely have to. But sometimes when I walk past it in the dark, I hear the static buzz faintly like it's trying to call me again. Last night, I found a note slipped under the cabin door. Just one sentence. You never closed the gate. And now, when I listen carefully, I think I hear the faintest whisper every time the wind shifts. Not outside. From inside the radio. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the smoke. I was hiking alone, a few hours north of Fairbanks, following a trail that wasn't even on the map. It was the kind of reckless trip I used to take to clear my head. The snow was thick, the kind that muffles every sound until you feel like the world has gone silent except for your own breath crunching into the air. My boots cracked the frozen ground, and each exhale came out in a sharp white cloud. I hadn't seen a single person in days. That was the whole point, but then I noticed it. Thin gray smoke twisting into the sky. Out here, that shouldn't have been possible. At first, I thought it was a trick of my eyes, but the closer I got, the stronger the smell became. That sharp, earthy tang of burning wood. My stomach tightened. People didn't just happen to live out here. And even if they did, why would their chimney be working in the middle of nowhere with no sign of life around? I almost turned back, but curiosity pushed me forward. That's when I saw it. A cabin tucked between black pines, small and old, its roof sagging under heavy snow. The wood looked rotted in places, dark with age. The windows were crusted over with frost, but faint light flickered inside. And then I saw the fireplace. Through a gap in the window, orange flames licked up into the chimney. Not just glowing embers, actual fire, alive and hungry. But the strangest thing? No footprints. The snow around the cabin was flawless, untouched. No trails, no snowmobile marks, no paths leading in or out. Just a cabin with a fire that couldn't have started on its own. I knocked on the door. My hand shook as I hit the wood. No answer. Hello? My voice cracked the silence. Still nothing. Finally, I pushed the door. It creaked open. The heat hit me instantly, rushing into my face like I'd stepped into another world. After days of bitter cold, the warmth was almost unbearable. Inside, the fire roared in the stone fireplace, filling the cabin with the crackling sounds of burning logs. A kettle sat on a metal stand beside it, steaming as if someone had just put it there. But the cabin was empty. The air smelled faintly of pine and smoke, but there was something else too, something metallic, like iron. I closed the door behind me, my boots dripping snow onto the creaking floorboards. The place was simple. One bed against the far wall, a rough wooden table, shelves with canned food lined up neatly. Everything was old but preserved, like someone still lived here. Only no one was around. I thought maybe they'd stepped outside. But then I remembered the snow. No footprints. I moved toward the table. That's when I noticed something scratched into the wood, etched deep and jagged. "Don't stay after dark." My throat tightened. I looked at the bed. The sheets were rumpled as if someone had just climbed out. The pillow was dented with the weight of a head. Still warm. I touched it with my gloved hand and felt the faint heat. That's when I heard it. A shuffle. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the loft above. The cabin had a small ladder leading up to a loft space under the roof. My chest clenched as the sound grew louder. Wood shifting. Something dragging across it. I backed up, reaching for the door, but before I could move, something fell from above. It wasn't an object. It was a boot. Old cracked leather hitting the floor with a dull thud. I froze, staring at it. The boot had snow stuck in the treads. But that didn't make sense. There hadn't been any tracks outside. The air shifted then, like the fire sucked in all the oxygen at once. The shadows from the flames stretched long across the cabin walls. For the first time, I noticed the windows were covered from the inside, boards nailed tightly over the frost. Trapped. My instinct screamed to leave. I lunged for the door, but the handle burned under my palm. It was red hot, like the fire had been feeding into it. I yanked my hand back, skin blistering under the glove. The shuffling sound started again. This time behind me, I spun around. The fire roared higher, as if feeding off my fear, and in the glow, I saw it. A figure crouched in the far corner. Pale skin stretched too tightly over bones. Eyes sunk deep but glowing faintly orange, reflecting the flames. Its clothes were ragged, clinging to a body that looked starved, and yet it smiled. Wide, unnatural, teeth yellow and jagged, the thing raised a hand slowly, pointing at me. The air grew unbearably hot. "Not your fire," it rasped. The voice was cracked like dry wood snapping. That was enough. I grabbed the nearest object, the kettle, and hurled it into the flames. Steam exploded, filling the cabin in a choking cloud. I used that moment to run, slamming my shoulder into the door until it burst open. I stumbled into the snow, coughing, falling to my knees. Behind me, the cabin glowed brighter and brighter until I swore the windows bled orange light into the forest. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. The next morning, I returned with a ranger I found miles down the trail. I was half frozen, barely coherent, but I dragged him back. I had to prove I wasn't losing my mind. When we got there, the clearing was empty. No cabin, no fireplace. Just untouched snow. The ranger gave me a long look and said, "You've been out here too long." But I know what I saw, and some nights when I close my eyes, I still feel that heat against my skin, and smell the smoke curling into the cold Alaskan air. I was holed up in a cheap motel outside of Anchorage, the kind with buzzing neon lights and paper-thin walls. The snowstorm outside had trapped me there, and I figured I'd kill time scrolling my phone until I fell asleep. That's when it rang. The screen lit up with a number I recognized instantly. It was my own. My name, my number, calling me. I laughed nervously at first, figuring it had to be a glitch or some scammer spoofing me. But when I answered, the line was filled with static, thick, rushing, almost like wind howling through a tunnel. I stayed on, listening. Then I heard something buried in the noise. A whisper. My own voice. "Don't go outside." I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. Missed call. From me. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I told myself it was nothing. Some hacker, some weird bug. But by the time the sun set, my phone buzzed again. Same number. Same caller ID. Mine. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Static filled the line again, louder this time, rushing so violently I had to pull the phone away from my ear. And then I heard it, again. My voice. But this time it wasn't warning me. It was laughing, not a casual laugh. A cruel, broken sound that dragged on too long. I slammed the phone shut, pulled the battery out, and left it on the nightstand. But even without power, the screen glowed faintly for a moment before going black. That night, I dreamed of standing outside the motel in the snow. Only it wasn't a dream. I woke up freezing, barefoot, my clothes soaked as if I'd been out there. But my door was locked from the inside. By the third night, I was shaking before the call even came. Midnight on the dot, my number lit up the screen. I didn't answer this time. I just watched it buzz, the glow painting the dark room with blue light. Then it stopped. Silence. I thought I was free until the motel phone rang. The old landline sitting on the desk. Its dusty red light blinked, shrill tone slicing the quiet. My stomach dropped. I picked it up with trembling hands. Hello? Static. Then, my voice again. Clearer now. You can't ignore me. The line went dead. I wanted to leave, but the storm outside made the roads impossible. I was stuck. Every night the calls grew longer. Sometimes it was laughter, sometimes sobbing, sometimes whispers so faint I couldn't make out the words. But it was always me, my tone, my cadence. On the fifth night, I finally snapped. I screamed into the phone, "What do you want from me?" The answer came sharp and cold, "To take my place." I froze. The connection cut, leaving me staring at my reflection in the dark TV screen. That was when I saw it. My phone was on the table, screen dark. But in the reflection, it was lit up, my number glowing across the glass, and on the bed behind me, a shape, my shape, sitting perfectly still, head tilted, watching. I spun around, but the bed was empty. I checked out of that motel at first light, storm or no storm. I don't even remember driving, just gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. But the calls didn't stop. Even now, back home, sometimes my phone buzzes at midnight, and every time I look down, it's my number. One of these nights, I know if I answer, it won't just be my voice on the line. It'll be me. I should have known something was wrong the moment I saw the smoke. I was hiking alone, a few hours north of Fairbanks, following a trail that wasn't even on the map. It was the kind of reckless trip I used to take to clear my head. The snow was thick, the kind that muffles every sound until you feel like the world has gone silent except for your own breath crunching into the air. My boots cracked the frozen ground, and each exhale came out in a sharp white cloud. I hadn't seen a single person in days. That was the whole point, but then I noticed it. Thin gray smoke twisting into the sky. Out here, that shouldn't have been possible. At first, I thought it was a trick of my eyes, but the closer I got, the stronger the smell became. That sharp, earthy tang of burning wood. My stomach tightened. People didn't just happen to live out here. And even if they did, why would their chimney be working in the middle of nowhere with no sign of life around? I almost turned back, but curiosity pushed me forward. That's when I saw it. A cabin tucked between black pines, small and old, its roof sagging under heavy snow. The wood looked rotted in places, dark with age. The windows were crusted over with frost, but faint light flickered inside. And then I saw the fireplace. Through a gap in the window, orange flames licked up into the chimney. Not just glowing embers, actual fire, alive and hungry. But the strangest thing? No footprints. The snow around the cabin was flawless, untouched. No trails, no snowmobile marks, no paths leading in or out. Just a cabin with a fire that couldn't have started on its own. I knocked on the door. My hand shook as I hit the wood. No answer. Hello? My voice cracked the silence. Still nothing. Finally, I pushed the door. It creaked open. The heat hit me instantly, rushing into my face like I'd stepped into another world. After days of bitter cold, the warmth was almost unbearable. Inside, the fire roared in the stone fireplace, filling the cabin with the crackling sounds of burning logs. A kettle sat on a metal stand beside it, steaming as if someone had just put it there. But the cabin was empty. The air smelled faintly of pine and smoke, but there was something else too, something metallic, like iron. I closed the door behind me, my boots dripping snow onto the creaking floorboards. The place was simple. One bed against the far wall, a rough wooden table, shelves with canned food lined up neatly. Everything was old but preserved, like someone still lived here. Only no one was around. I thought maybe they'd stepped outside. But then I remembered the snow. No footprints. I moved toward the table. That's when I noticed something scratched into the wood, etched deep and jagged. "Don't stay after dark." My throat tightened. I looked at the bed. The sheets were rumpled as if someone had just climbed out. The pillow was dented with the weight of a head. Still warm. I touched it with my gloved hand and felt the faint heat. That's when I heard it. A shuffle. Slow, deliberate. Coming from the loft above. The cabin had a small ladder leading up to a loft space under the roof. My chest clenched as the sound grew louder. Wood shifting. Something dragging across it. I backed up, reaching for the door, but before I could move, something fell from above. It wasn't an object. It was a boot. Old, cracked leather hitting the floor with a dull thud. I froze, staring at it. The boot had snow stuck in the treads. But that didn't make sense. There hadn't been any tracks outside. The air shifted then, like the fire sucked in all the oxygen at once. The shadows from the flames stretched long across the cabin walls. For the first time, I noticed the windows were covered from the inside, boards nailed tightly over the frost. Trapped. My instinct screamed to leave. I lunged for the door, but the handle burned under my palm. It was red hot, like the fire had been feeding into it. I yanked my hand back, skin blistering under the glove. The shuffling sound started again. This time behind me, I spun around. The fire roared higher, as if feeding off my fear. And in the glow, I saw it. A figure crouched in the far corner. Pale skin stretched too tightly over bones. Eyes sunk deep but glowing faintly orange, reflecting the flames. Its clothes were ragged, clinging to a body that looked starved. And yet it smiled. Wide, unnatural, teeth yellow and jagged. The thing raised a hand slowly, pointing at me. The air grew unbearably hot. "Not your fire," it rasped. The voice was cracked like dry wood snapping. That was enough. I grabbed the nearest object, the kettle, and hurled it into the flames. Steam exploded, filling the cabin in a choking cloud. I used that moment to run, slamming my shoulder into the door until it burst open. I stumbled into the snow, coughing, falling to my knees. Behind me, the cabin glowed brighter and brighter until I swore the windows bled orange light into the forest. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. The next morning, I returned with a ranger I found miles down the trail. I was half frozen, barely coherent, but I dragged him back. I had to prove I wasn't losing my mind. When we got there, the clearing was empty. No cabin, No fireplace, just untouched snow. The ranger gave me a long look and said, "You've been out here too long." But I know what I saw, and some nights when I close my eyes, I still feel that heat against my skin, and smell the smoke curling into the cold Alaskan air.